So yeah, we'll be talking more about case studies and what we're seeing in the banking area. So let Bruno kick it off, and we'll be doing this as a double act. Over to you.
Thank you, Mark. So we'll go the whole way. So you know Mark. I'm more specialized in finance at Axway, really focusing on finance and insurance industries. So let's step back a little bit on what we've been hearing today, and I will introduce a context. What is the context of banking, insurance we are talking about, and where are we? Actually, this, the digitalization going quick, enabling lots of things happening like this, having everything on the tip of, on your smartphone and almost everywhere. What is specific to our business, to finance business, is that it starts with payment becoming real time more and more, and it's about risks. This is risks on money movement. This is AML. This is also prudential risks. We all know about the last crisis. We are in a way still there. What happens is that, and I think Chris' intervention was very clear about that. We are no more living in an island, and what is important is the ecosystem around all this. The ecosystem matters. It's not only a matter of a bank, it's not only a matter of insurance, it's a matter of the ecosystem. And, if I look at the bank, on this drawing, we are really focusing on what is going on. What are the interactions we can provide in terms of social media, in terms of mobile, obviously, but whatever channel can access the end customer, this is what is at. So now, more and more, maybe not enough, but more and more banks are considering the customer expectations. So no more being enterprise or product-centric, but really customer-centric, leveraging the interactions and value they can add. So we have to drive value, to bring more value to the end customer. Because we are in a digital world, we need to go fast, and innovation and the services need to come quick, and quicker, and quicker and quicker. What happens is that in FSI, confidence is key. This is something that financial industries, generally speaking, banking in particular, have, in a way, some kind of trust in the fact that their data will not be stolen, in transactions, in a way or another. When I heard Arnaud picture, it was really funny to me, because everybody is looking for something. Some are looking for the Holy Grail, and some are looking to Monty Python. We have the same culture, obviously. What is the let's say, the Holy Grail in terms of interactions? And let's start with what do exist now. What exists now are different channels through which the interaction can be done to the end customer. It's really product-centric. It's the bank going to their customer through the mobile, through the call center, through the branches, through the ATM, through the online web, things like this, right? Now, more and more, what happened, and this was named, multi-channel. Remember multi-channel? Multi-channel is actually bad joke, because it's multi-siloed channel. There is a word missing into this. Now we are talking of something really new. This is omni-channel. Wow, what is new? We are trying to get rid of a silo in the middle. But this is always about providing the same transactions to the end customer in an omni-channel strategy. So you can begin in one point, going on, in the mobile, for example, going on the online web, going on in the call center, finalizing in the branch or on mobile, whatever. This is omni-channel, and whatever transaction happens. What is the holy grail around this? It's, if you are really customer-centric, you will not only care of the various services that you may provide to the end customer. You will think about your customer, and you will look to what? You will look to what some say about, name, moment of truth, meaning that in the shoes of the end customer, where are the different moments where you can provide such or such service, or some elementary services. In this regard, when you go there, you start from enterprise centricity towards the customer centricity. And there is, well, the holy grail. You know this, right? You remember, same film, that couple of extracts that Arno played earlier. I think the moment of truth is really great, because this is where you will think like a customer when you are an FSI, and it's kind of hard for some banks still. I like one drawing from Accenture. So this is not our drawing, but it's one of the of Accenture, and I know our friend from Accenture will come here on stage, so maybe he will leverage this one. What I like is that if you put the customer in the center, if you put this life and the various transactions or habits that can happen, then you can think from a bank perspective what you can provide as of value. And in some cases you can become, as a bank, an aggregator of various services. You can become an access facilitator to others. You can become an advice provider. Then, when you think like this, you think like leveraging the ecosystem around you and providing this to your end customer, being, let's say, end customer, corporate, whatever. You are really part of the ecosystem. So, Martin, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. And what I'm going to do is drop down a level in terms of how this is implemented and show some architecture. One of the things that we see, as Bruno mentioned, in omni-channel is that it's different than multi-channel. So Bruno made the good point that multi-channel often means multiple siloed channels. With omni-channel, it's much more of a continuous experience. One of the things we'll show in our workshop later on today is how a customer can start a transaction, start a process on a smartphone, but then move through different interfaces. And that's all enabled through underlying API layers. So smartphones are important, phones are important, but I would echo something. We did a webinar yesterday with a different analyst firm than Gartner, but they made the point that if you think of APIs as being only for mobile, you're making a mistake. So in that case, it's important to think of APIs as being much broader, think of them in terms of B2B and much more broad than mobile. In that way, you can think of APIs as being multi-channel. I'm showing the famous iceberg slide here. I think people who go to a lot of API conferences are used to this slide. Interestingly enough, it's always the same iceberg. I always hope that the photographer who did this photograph is getting the royalties for this. But the key thing is normally this iceberg is used to show that private APIs are a lot more numerous than public APIs, which is true. But the other thing is that APIs are now not just for mobile. Mobile is the tip of the iceberg, but you're linking to partner services, enabling the things that Kristen from Gartner talked about as well in terms of new business models on top of the APIs. So to echo Arno's points, I think one thing we've seen in Axway is a few years ago when people moved from SOAP to REST, a lot of that was because, we have these mobile apps, and the mobile apps need to have a more lightweight interface. It's moved on from that now. It's beyond just mobile, and it's more about how do we enable our organization to be a platform, how do we enable the least friction in terms of people using that platform, and that's much more gone beyond mobile and thinking in the future towards monetization. So in a traditional bank, there really wasn't that type of linkage between the underlying payment systems and the what's now called the digital, or in the past, the e-commerce or web teams. In Axway, we're in the interesting position because we come from a background of file transfer, of payment services, Swift, PSD2 as well, now being more API enabled. What that means is that we are really at that interface. We're seeing the coming together of these different groups. So the core banking with APIs, often different teams within a bank that now have to talk to each other. It can't be just the blue sky, innovation that's not linked to the rest of the bank. So because we talk to both groups, we see this happening. And to show how this is happening, what I've done is I've taken, so this is a real life example from one of our large banking customers that I've anonymized. So there's a lot going on here. You can see the first mention of microservices. But the key thing is they explain that, sometimes people talk about like, a bimodal approach or two-speed IT. They said, actually, we have three-speed in our bank. We have at the top the very frequent changes, multiple changes per day at the UI layer, at the mobile layer. Pushing changes, continuous delivery up here. Not just mobile, web, rich web applications, online banking, connecting into cloud, plugins to different SaaS accounting platforms, for example. And then white labeled banking as well. In their case, they actually have a bank that white labels their services. Here you have your API exposure layer. You're tailoring the APIs, so-called experience APIs, to what the clients expect. So if it's a REST client, if it's a mobile client that expects pagination, you're tailoring the experience to those APIs. You're getting your insight here at the business level. Down here, I say microservices. In their case, they really do. Other cases, there's some microservice washing going on, if you could call it that. But the key thing is there's multiple platforms down here being brought together. These have reasonably frequent updates in terms of bringing on new services, self-contained, and all the other good things that come with the microservice architecture. What's interesting is below that you have the older ways of doing integration and the core banking systems that don't change fast. So in this type of pattern, we see again and again. So often I'm speaking with digital platform groups, banks, financial services institutions, and this type of pattern comes up very often. And the question is, how to bring these groups together, the UX group, the group here that might have been called a integration group, and now is basically their customer now becomes the UX layer at the top. So this is something we'll be drilling into a little bit more in the workshop later. But the key thing here is that being able to manage these different groups together and not having a situation where the multiple speeds cause problems. So that's something that we see a lot. I wanted to give a case study. So obviously a lot of our customers are proprietary in terms of what they're doing, the information. But one that we have that's actually a video on our website. You can look at axway.com and see a testimonial video and other information about it. It's Dun & Bradstreet. I think these are an interesting company because Dun & Bradstreet is probably the classic example of a company that has a lot of financial data and wants to, as they put it, liberate that data, monetize that data, and do that through APIs. And indeed, the consumers of this are often financial institutions that are doing risk lookups on businesses, applying for loans and so on. But also beyond that, we see in the rest of our business, for example, in supply chain, if you're signing up a new supplier, you want to check what's the risk of this supplier. So what's interesting about D&B is that they have their API. And actually, if you look at the developer.dnb.com, they have a SOAP interface and a REST interface as well. So that's interesting, and they're not taking a religious side one way or the other with it. They do realize that for some people that SOAP might make sense, and they also have a asynchronous way of interacting as well. If you're doing large transactions, large volumes of data, you can also do that through files. So this is what they have at that layer. Looking in a little bit more detail, and again, you can look at the video, I think what's interesting is that they literally make money from their API. So the API is used to plug into Salesforce, to plug into other systems. It's monetized when you use the API. You're paying for that. There's a Ching event for using the API. We ourselves in Axway use this API in our own Salesforce implementation, so our salespeople can do lookups on potential customers and prospects. Again, you can see in the video they did 17 million actually 2 years ago, and that's been growing nicely. I think the key thing here is to think about data as a service. I was having a conversation earlier with someone from one of the banks here, and they were talking about the sheer volume of data they have and exposing that data out. Now, for a lot of organizations, they don't want to be selling that data for many reasons, but you do also want to have a data as a service approach. And there's good examples here in terms of being able to put that volume of data on tap, match the SLAs that people expect, and then in the future, depending on the business model, to monetize that. It could be, Arnaud used the example of dinosaurs turning into turkeys. Kristen used the example of new business models coming along on top of the platform. You don't know what's coming down the line. So having a monetization approach in place early, at least the metering in place for that, is good in terms of APIs. So, looking at the big picture here, we see that APIs have to link to enterprise services. It can't be that the digital team or innovation team is completely separated from what's below. Those links could be converting from existing SOA services. One of the interesting things about, there's a banking API survey, which you'll be hearing about later, which Axway is a sponsor, and that survey surveyed a lot of practitioners at banks around the world. One of the questions, to Arnaud's point earlier, is, are you using SOAP or REST? Will SOAP replace REST? Are you going to put a REST interface in front of SOAP? There was actually a majority who said, our goal is to replace SOAP with REST, but there was also quite a large proportion who are putting a REST interface in front of SOAP, hopefully not a roast interface. I'll be using that one myself. But the key thing here is you're interfacing with existing systems, but it's not just that. You're also connecting to message queues. You're connecting to even older systems than SOAP. So the key thing here is to link that in, provide omni-channel exposure, not just multi-channel. So omni-channel meaning that people can move between the channels, keep the same session, keep the same ways of interacting with the bank. We have a video of how that works, the experience there. We also will be talking a lot about security. Security, without kind of throwing a dampener on a lot of the discussion, but security is never far behind discussions of opening your data out with APIs. OAuth, especially OAuth 2, API keys, throttling of APIs, all of that is important. So security will be a big focus. And just going back to that banking APIs survey that I mentioned, it was also interesting that when people were asked in that survey, what's the most important part of an API management platform, in your view, that the banking practitioners said the most important aspect of that is security. So not, as you might think, for example, the exposure of APIs out in a catalog or things like that, but security. So you can see how important security is for this area. Then tomorrow we're doing a different kind of workshop, which is what we call a cafe-style workshop, but it's where we'll have folks at different tables, different discussion points, doing more of a discussion about different aspects, of course, including security, but also including API design, REST and SOAP, and then getting into some of the details, especially here in London, OpenAPI, PSD2, other initiatives that are really important for where financial services comes together with APIs. So that's late tomorrow afternoon. And then, for people that really want to get actually hands-on with the technology, we run workshops. We call them API First workshops. We've one coming up here in London next month, another one the month after, Sweden, really all over the world. And that's where you can literally get hands-on with APIs, call APIs through different B2B interfaces and apps, and apply security rules and so on. So with that, we have a little bit of time, I think, for questions.
Yeah, first applause, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have questions? I think we still have a bit of time for that. Questions for Mark and Bruno? No? Okay, maybe Matty.
Yeah, I will open the question. It's no, I had a question mostly about the people you may see, like the bank or the financial company you are talking.
Yeah.
Can you make a kind of, not a roadmap, but like a specific magic quadrant or something? But what are the type of people you see, right? People that are completely ready, people that are far from. So I don't know, but like, can you just mind map this first?
Yeah, I think one difference that I see between financial institutions is that some are ready in the sense of having their teams aligned and talking to each other, and some aren't so much. So I think one of the key things is to align, the UX team that might be now involved with continuous delivery, DevOps, in terms of updating their apps, updating their web interfaces, with core banking teams, and maybe there's a meeting there that will naturally happen in terms of the core banking systems have put in place often SOAP interfaces, and they're kind of building up, and the UX folks are building down. But in many cases, those are disjointed. Some banks that I would put in the more leader part of the Magic Quadrant, if you like, are where they brought those groups together. And they've said, we're going to create a digital group, for example, a digital strategy group, and it's going to bring together people who have stakes in the core banking systems and how to link often with message queues into their link with, for example, an existing ESB, link that together with the UX team. So that's, I think, a key to being a leader in this area. Bruno?
Yeah, I would like on top of this something from the external, because when we talk about financial services, we are talking of banks, but we are also talking of insurance. And actually what we do see is a different of approach. The insurance market and insurance people are more used to leverage brokers, distribution channels, and the bank. So what we see in our project is that if we come back on the last slide, usually this is more where the, let's say, the insurance start with, opening a distribution channel means real-time interface. API is perfect match in order to do this, thanks to monetization on top. So that this is where they begin. While in the banking industry, they are used to have one front door, for the customer, but also for the information system. And they do understand that the customer first is key. So they more often start with this. Where I see the convergence is that from an insurance perspective, what they are looking for is more interaction with their end customer. We all have interactions every year when we pay the bill, at the end for our policy renewal, right? This is not enough. They want more interaction. They want to look at more in moment of truth, and when you are talking to the insurance, you don't want only to talk to your insurance to pay a bill, or when you are afloat, you have a float, right? So this is where comes the Internet of Things. All the pay as you drive, the pay how you drive, how you are fit, all this Fitbit stuff and so on, are bringing more interactions from this side. And what happens is that it leads to more interactions between the insurance to their customer and lead to more business, more value, added value to the end customer. So there is a convergence from the insurance perspective. The other side do exist. Banks do understand that they will not boil the ocean by their own. They need to rely on the ecosystem, meaning that they need to leverage external services in order to aggregate them, but also in sometimes to deliver their best-in-class services to the ecosystem so that they can use it or leverage more market segments and things like this. The key is the monetization on top. So back to your question, I think from a industry perspective, it depends. And well, I shared with you what we see from insurance and banking perspective. Make that sense?
Yep. And just to add to that, even back in the days of web services, insurance was ahead as well with things like Accord, because as Bruno said, in insurance, the business is often done indirectly through an agent, or where insurance is sold as sort of part of a larger financial product, like a mortgage, and therefore you have to make it easy to get the quote, look up the quote, register the customer. So there's more of a heritage, if you like, of being thinking of the organization as a platform and being more open.
Cool, thank you. Do you have other questions?
Hi, thanks for this. So it's thinking back to what Kristen Moyer was showing about the business models, you were talking about making sure you've got a monetization component or some metrics in place for that. But when does the conversation turn from creating new customer-centric products or using available data services or whatever that you've got that you could expand out to partners? When does that sort of conversation turn into one about having a variety of business models within a bank?
Yeah, I think it's often the case where, going back to what Mehdi said about the magic quadrants and where people are, that often what they want to do is first of all put in place the APIs, put in place the aggregation layer, have the machinery in place to gather the metrics and apply plans, quotas, throttling to the APIs, to be able to then prepare for when you're monetizing those APIs. So I gave the example of Dun & Bradstreet, which I think is kind of the classic example where they have data, people pay to get the data. In banking, often the APIs are used as part of a larger solution, online banking, payments, and you're paying for that solution. So you're not necessarily paying per API, and there's conversations to be had then about, are you penalizing people for having like a chatty API and so on. But I think the key thing is to have that machinery in place so that you are, it's kind of going back up to that slide with the kind of big picture, but to be able to get that analytics inside, being able to apply your plans here, so that then when the time comes to say, well, actually this API, it's interesting how an organization in the ecosystem is using it, we should start charging for that API, that you can actually do that because you have the machinery in place to do that. That's what we see. It's different in different industries. Some are more ahead, but at the moment it's more, Accenture actually has another thing that looks like a rugby ball. They have a maturity model, but it shows monetization being quite far up the ball. But below that you have the metering and analytics. So you have to do the metering and analytics first to be able to do the monetization later.
What I would like to add is that actually nothing is set into stone. Digital is also about uncertainty. So the question is for a bank, for an insurance or a financial institution, generally speaking, and any enterprise, is how do you face the uncertainty? The approach we are showing here in terms of architecture is a way to face uncertainty and to be able to, to cope any business model, and in order to make sure that whatever business model or let's say scheme of interaction that will maybe able to bring value, the financial institution will be able to provide quickly the microservices based on the let's say legacy services that they do have, so that they will do their best in the digital world.